Tandem Nomads, episode 108.
What I realized was that it was this kind of deconstruction of my identity. I grew up really, in the Northeast United States, thinking my career was the definition of who I am. And I had a complete identity shift. For me, it was a way to jump off the traditional career ladder and to reassemble who I am based around what I've always wanted to be.
Hello, Nomad Nation. Welcome to Tandem Nomads, the podcast show and entrepreneurship platform where you can find great inspiration and tips to turn your dual career challenges into a successful portable business and thrive in your global nomadic life. This is your host, Amel Deregi. Thank you for tuning in. I'm so thrilled to have you here. And today, I have a fantastic guest to introduce you, Michael Ginsberg. So, Michael, are you ready for the ride?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. So, Michael, I'm going to introduce you very briefly of what I know from you, and you let me know what you'll give us a bit more details. But so you have graduated, you have a doctorate and a master in environmental engineering, sustainability, and you started your career in international development before you moved abroad with your partner. And you've been to, if I remember well, Niger, Canada, and now Curacao. I know that some people say Curacao or Curacao. How would you pronounce that?
That's right. Yeah, Curacao.
Curacao. Here we go.
Yeah, they've got that little squiggly.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so while you moved in these countries at the beginning, you did a few jobs related to energy, sustainability, and things like that. You'll tell us more about it. But then you decided to start your own company when you wanted to realize that you wanted something that was location free. So I want you to tell us a little more about that process. So tell us first what got you to move abroad and say, yes, let's go for this adventure.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure being on your podcast.
My pleasure.
So I just wanted to clarify, I'm a current doctoral candidate, and I am working on earth and environmental engineering, and I have a master's, completed. So the business idea really started, like you said, from really this frustration that came out of moving from, every 2 to 3 years, which I think all of your listeners can relate to. Mm-hmm. And I realized quickly, especially within the State Department, U.S. government context, in order to maintain some sort of consistency, it was necessary to really do my own thing.
Well, that's a critical point, and I do believe in that. I guess you're in the right place here to share that point. That for a lot of people would think automatically when they move abroad of what kind of job I can find when I move to that country. And I think that's the first reflex in a way to try to find a similar job than what we've been doing before or something new that we want to do. But I guess, like you said, once we move from a country to another, that's the biggest challenge. And this is why I truly believe in the portable business, something that we can turn into something location independent. But I want to talk about that, first of all, how you made that decision. Did you think it through? Did you have a conversation with your partner? How did it work before you even jumped into this adventure? What did you do to prepare this or not?
Yeah, well, jumping into living abroad or into the business?
Into living abroad, because
you
started living abroad before the business, right?
Right. Well, that was a tough decision. And I think like you, I'm a New Yorker. I'm from New York. And it really was like, jumping off a cliff. It was this leap of faith that I took. And so I went to undergraduate university in Washington, D.C., and that's where I met my partner. And we started dating, and before we finished school. So he graduated a year prior to me. And then about around the time that I graduated, he was really starting the process of joining the Foreign Service. So I started working in DC for an organization called World Learning, which does international development work throughout the world, and giving capacity building, human rights, environmental issues, education. And I really was on a career path, having just finished my undergraduate, and then all of a sudden he jumps off and does something really out of left field, and I didn't know, what to do at that point. So we went through the process in the State Department. It's called Flag Day, and you get an assignment. And so we had an assignment, and our assignment was Gabon. And of course, a little foreshadowing here, we never did go to Gabon. So about a few weeks later, he found out that that position was no longer available and that he would be going to Niger. So there was no really a process of choice there. So the day, I still remember very clearly, he found out that he was going to be going. He was very concerned about the security and also my career prospects there. And he told me pretty much flat out, he said, okay, you need to stay in the US and I need to go and do this at least for a year by myself. And so at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to move back to New York. We were still in Washington, and I was going to do my master's at Columbia, which I ended up doing. And after finishing the master's for a year of being apart, I was very torn about whether, to go and join up with him in Africa or, to take a job offer with a consulting firm. And of course, everyone was telling me, what are you doing? Of course, you have to take the job offer. But, I followed my heart, and I ended up in Niger for the next year and a half.
Wow. All right. Fantastic. What would we do for love, right?
That's right.
Okay. So did you prepare that move, or did you just take your luggage and go?
I'm sorry?
Did you prepare that move, or did you just go there and figure out what you would do once you're there?
Definitely I very much prepared for that move, because just to get a little more detailed, when he originally was assigned Niger, we looked at we looked at the job options that I would have within the embassy. And at the time, the State Department was still figuring out gay couples. So they did not consider me what's called an eligible family member. So I was not eligible for any of the positions within the embassy. So that was another reason why I didn't go originally. And so when I finished my master's, I then applied again. This time I had become an eligible family member. And so I found a position. I already had a position within the embassy that I had secured before moving there.
Okay, that's good. So I wanted to highlight this point because I do believe that there's a lot of people who do move abroad but don't prepare beforehand. And I think that's really important. It's great to be adventurous, but it's also good to know what's waiting for you there. And even if there is nothing, at least you don't come, and it's important to have a plan in a way. And you did have a plan. And I think that's where the success stories start, is when you have a plan. So that's how was it for you to find a job? Because you did a lot of things. I looked at your resume. You did so many interesting things in Niger and Canada, which led you to starting your business. So how was that experience for you in general, doing all those jobs?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I found the job I did working within the embassy was frankly not everything I thought it was going to be. So I went next door. There was an American school. I had no aspirations or idea about being a teacher. So I went over there with the intention of, I just did my master's in sustainability and energy. And I went over there and I said, look, I can be a sustainability manager for the school. So I met with the school director, and she nodded her head and said, that's wonderful. But then she said, actually, we really have a need for a social studies, high school social studies, and middle school environmental science teacher. And I said, that's great. Who are you going to get for that? And so she was looking at me the whole time. So I said, why the heck not? And I just jumped in and I just did it. So I did that for about a year, and that was a good experience. In addition to that, I had some experience with a friend I made at the UN. So we looked at some analyses of internally displaced people within Niamey, Niger. I mean, that was something that I was very interested in from my life before the Foreign Service, those types of human rights issues. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a common point within my life. I always leverage the previous experiences that I've had.
Yeah. And I think that's where it leads to suddenly how you founded the business. And this is why I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people don't necessarily imagine themselves as entrepreneur or don't really know how they could find the right business idea for them. So I just wanted to show in your case that you have always been gravitating in your field anyways. So could you take us through that transition from having a job? I think you were in Canada, then you moved to Canada. You also,
right.
What did you do in Canada?
Yeah, so we got to Canada and we were very excited. We drove from Pennsylvania all the way to Western Canada. And I just remember as we crossed the border, I was in tears because, I mean, it's Canada, it's wonderful, but I had this sense of loss of identity again from having made this transition. And I was no one in Canada. And so I had this idea that I'm going to get a really good position. I'm going to get hired by some good company. And I went through that for about a year. I knocked on every door. I had 5 interviews with Deloitte, and I was convinced that I was going to get a really good position. I ended up getting a consulting job with a company that did lead green buildings work for Alberta infrastructure. It was a very good experience, but it wasn't the career making opportunity that I was looking for. And then finally, at the end of the time in Canada, about 6 months left, I had a job offer to work for an emerging solar energy company. But I called them up and I said, "Look, I have 6 months left. Do you still want to take me on?" And they said no. And so that was also heartbreaking. So that, I think, is the time in which I realized that I needed to make my own thing and not try to find career satisfaction in a 9-to-5 employee position.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. You said 2 things here that I think will resonate with a lot of people. It had resonated with me too, is that feeling that you're somehow suddenly you're nobody. And that's a hard tough. It's not true, but it is. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people would feel it like, suddenly who am I? Because I have to start again from scratch. And that's one of the things that we try to prevent here in TN108. Right. And the fact that you came up by your own with that idea of starting your own business. So did you get any help with that, or take us through that? From the moment you realized you want to start your own thing to doing it, what happened?
Yeah. So I in advance of the podcast, I jotted down some of my major reflections about this topic. And the first one I think we talked about, which is this identity loss and identity shift. And coming out the other side of that enabled me to reimagine what was possible within my own life. So that was really the first and most fundamental thing that happened to me, personally. The second thing is the wonderful EFM network. And
so let's tell to the Nomad Nation, what is EFM?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm acronyms. Yeah. So the network of other tandem partners, and I say EFM because that's specifically what we say within the government. Yeah, so eligible family members. So that's really for the Department of State and the Department of Defense.
So but there's a network for the spouses of the people who work for the Foreign Service.
Exactly. So there's just a really great network, and I really linked in with them. I connected with them on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and they were in the same position as me. And so through them, I was able to find my first consulting opportunities. The very first one is from a wonderful woman who worked at a think tank, and I think she has her own business now doing research consulting. And she just really needed to find someone that could do editing work and analysis. And so, that was a great experience. And then on, it just sort of spiraled from there. And I was able to get continued work through those connections. And then the other the other principle I would say is that there's something I learned in high school, in my high school drama class, which was from improvisation, you always say yes. So I really took that to heart. You really in the first few years of starting my business, which was never turn down an opportunity, regardless of what it is. And so I was always available to my clients. They never even questioned my commitment to their work. And so that enabled me to build up a really good brand and reputation.
That's fantastic. Wow. Thank you for sharing those 3 points about the identity, about the fact that you started with a network. And I want to share a word about that, about the FM and also in general, the network. And the third thing, always say yes and be available for any opportunities that come to you. So those are really good advice. Thank you for that. You said something important here about network when you're just starting out your business. That's super, super important to be part of a community. And a lot of people tell me that I don't have this community. So it's true that I find it amazing that the Foreign Service has the AFM available for the spouses of the Foreign Service. I really think that's fantastic. So it's one less problem for those who come from the US or the Foreign Service, American Foreign Service. But do have examples of people who don't have that. And like, if you don't have it, then create it. So it goes back hand in hand with what you were saying about saying yes, also taking the opportunities that come to you. And if you don't have them, create them. And for instance, in my husband's situation, this organization is not existing, but we're a couple of spouses getting together and trying to make this happen because we are much stronger if we're together. So my biggest advice to all of you who are listening, if you see that there's not a network around you, try to build it either through the community, the neighbors, or if you're an expat surroundings, if not through the spouses of the colleagues of your partner. But try to be creative and find it. And online, obviously, there's so many groups. Obviously, there's Tandem Nomads group. That's a place for you to come if you wonder where to go. So I just want to share that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Okay, so you got your first gigs through this platform, right? So when did you start really becoming a company?
Well, business registration I did just last year. Mm-hmm. So officially, I suppose, last year.
What's the name, actually? It's
it's called Mastering Green.
Mastering Green. So could you please tell us about your business now?
I think Sure. So as a combination of really what I'm passionate about, Mastering Green provides environmental and energy consulting services. Primarily, we serve U.S. government facilities. So that's where most of my business has been. But I also do consulting for private corporations. So those types of services would include energy audits, solar energy design and installation, as well as energy analytics, and also training of staff. So it's really kind of a spectrum. The concept of energy and environment. I'm sorry?
And who are your typical clients?
So the primary clients we have about 4. Primarily, they're within the State Department. So the Bureau of Overseas Building Operations is one of the big clients that I have. And for them, I provide technical training to the staff who work in U.S. embassies. I do this. My company consults with an engineering firm in the Washington, D.C. area. And so through them, we design and then train these local staff in everything from energy management in buildings to HVAC and plumbing, fluid dynamics, some technical as well as practical issues. So without getting too detailed, the U.S. government has designed and constructed many new facilities throughout the world, and they often the local staff are the ones who are responsible for maintaining those systems, but they often don't have the requisite training to do so. So we fill in that gap.
So you've been saying we, so I would love for you to tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I started to bring on help. I have about 3 or 4 consultants that work for me on a freelance basis right now. And they do everything from help with administrative assistance to research. I'm working on a couple of books right now, so they're helping with research and editing. So it's really kind of as tasks arise. Another big client I had last year was, no, actually, starting in January, was the Oregon Solar Energy Industry Association, and that was a great project. And I was the technical training coordinator for them, and of course did that under the umbrella of my company. And we put together this year's Oregon Solar Energy Conference, getting all of the technical trainers, putting together the programming. And so I had my team helping on that, getting the connections in place, all of the logistical stuff.
Wow. Okay. I have so many questions. I'm going to try to organize this in a way that it makes sense for everybody who's listening. So maybe real briefly, how did you get from just making a couple of gigs through your network to now having a company where you actually also outsource some of the work and can really call it a business? How did you do that transition?
Well, you know how I said that you always say yes?
Yeah.
Well, now I'm going to go back on that. And I'm going to say that at some point, hopefully, you're going to be too busy. And I noticed it in my personal life. I was staying up all night. I was never sleeping. My partner was not happy. And it was good. It was success. But what I had to do was I had to start prioritizing. And so my first strategy there was not to say no, but it was to hire people who I could start to delegate the more administrative but time-consuming tasks too, so that it would free up time for me. And that's really the switch, I think, or the transition in my business, where I went from a collection of gigs to an actual business.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So, but how did you get to so many gigs? I want to go back to what you said about the no, because that's super important. But how did you get those many gigs before you could really have so much work that you can incorporate?
Well, I really think it's definitely through your network and through word of mouth. So I still have, I would say, my primary clients. Those are the State Department, a couple of engineering firms in the DC area. And through them, they started to recommend me to other firms that it was actually becoming too big. And so, like I said, I had to prioritize my time.
That's fantastic.
And through other networks. So I have this family member network, but I also have the Columbia University network as a current PhD candidate. And so through them, I'm able to leverage opportunities as well. And so I'm currently working on a new kind of idea with a classmate and we're trying to launch a new product, basically a software product.
All right. Exciting. Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I was insisting on this is because a lot of people ask me, so how can I get the word out from my business? And when you're starting, that's really important to realize that I can share as many marketing tips and strategies as possible. But the number one place to start is building relationships, true, genuine relationship, and serving people as best as you can. And I think this is what led you to where you are. You built relationship, you performed, you took care of your clients, and that generates natural recommendations, word of mouth. Word of mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I would just say that I did try Google advertising and Facebook, and I didn't find much success in them. And maybe they work better for certain businesses. Like my parents, for instance, have a skincare business, and they get a lot of revenue from Groupon and from Google AdWords. But for mine, it really was not the right business model.
Consulting services are a bit different. If you sell a product, I think it's a bit easier. Or a digital product, Facebook, for example, ads are good if you know how to target well and cheaply. But I think in your case, the fact that you have managed to turn a consulting business and that's my next point, that's quite physical. You need to be present physically. So how did you make it a portable business?
That's, I think, probably the most important question. Yeah. And I have a few tactics, I would say, and I don't mean to be so clandestine or secretive, but unfortunately that is I think we're still in a world where the client has an expectation of us being in a specific location physically. So what I do is, number one, I always make it appear as though I'm based in Washington, D.C. or New York. I have a Vonage business account. And through that Vonage business account, my number always appears as a US phone number. It's always the same number. So that small investment has really gone a long way. I make myself readily available and accessible through that number. So regardless of whether I'm in Ouagadougou, West Africa, or New York, I'm always reachable for the most part.
So I just want to explain a little bit for those who are not familiar with that system. It's a little bit, is it with Skype that you do that, or Vonage? Is it?
No, Vonage is Vonage is its own voice over IP internet protocol business company. And so they also offer the service for non-business.
Basically, just to explain the concept, I will put the link of Vonage for those who are interested in the show note tweet of this page, of this episode. But basically, Vonage and Skype, for instance, they both offer you the opportunity to have a local number, even if you call from another country. I just wanted to explain that. And that's a great. This is a typical example of how technology today makes it possible to have a portable business. So you have a local number. And what else?
So I think the other part of that is that when the topic comes up of where I am, I'm not really forthcoming. And this is something that I actually learned in my personal life, which was, with being gay and having a male partner, it's not their right to know. It's my privilege to tell them. And that's the same thing I feel actually about being a spouse or being a tandem partner, which is it's my privilege for you to know that, and you need to know me well enough. And so with a lot of my clients, they have no idea, that I'm out of the country. And I think I can do that easily because of the fact that I'm a PhD student and, I have a New York address. My company is based in the US, so it's very easy to make that appearance, or make that appear as such.
So that's a good point. You don't need to say, you just have to learn a typical maybe of sentences. Do you have some kind of sentences or a way of responding that you could recommend?
Yeah. So I often will say, well, I'm half of the time I'm in New York, and the rest of the time I'm traveling for work, or, I'm often on the road consulting. And then down the road, as I get to know somebody better, I will say, well, I'm actually in Curacao, for a lot of the time. And then they finally open up. I finally open up to them. But, it's very,
to know you professionally until
there's a difference.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have to negotiate within myself all the time with each person. So it's definitely not an easy thing. Like I said, I think I got burned by being in Canada and then having this great job offer. And then I because I told them I was leaving, I didn't have that opportunity. So I'm a lot more guarded now and cautious about what I say and to whom. Because I also think that people have their preconceptions. I say, oh, well, you left, you're doing, you don't have your own career. Well, no, I do. And you don't really understand what it's like. And so that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah, I do. I don't know about you, but I can share something personal too about that. I do see it even today. I have a thriving business. And when I'm with my husband, I'm his spouse. So a lot of people tell me, so are you enjoying the shopping in New York? I'm like,
I know.
Yeah.
And I often get from my friends here in Curacao after I've traveled for work or for school, and I come back and they say, oh, how was vacation? Oh, you're always on vacation. Like, actually, no, when I'm here in Curacao, I'm more on vacation than I am when I'm traveling.
Exactly.
I'm actually traveling for work.
Yeah, so a lot of frustrations, but I think at some point we just have to be secure about what we do and why we do it, and not
Yeah.
care so much. I used to care a lot about what people say, and remarks like "you're here just to shop." I'm like, oh my god. But at some point, we just have to be at peace with it because it doesn't matter what people think, as long as we're doing our job properly and are happy with what we're doing. So tell me about your business model really briefly. How does it work? How do you make money? I feel like Kevin. Do you know Kevin in Sharks?
Oh, yes, I do.
How do
Yeah.
you make money?
So now I'm going to pitch to you, right? Yeah. So basically, we're a no-brainer. Number one, with when it comes to energy efficiency, for every dollar that you spend based on our recommendations, you can get back $3. So that's less than a year payback period. That's energy efficiency. When it comes to solar energy, it's a more of a niche market. So I have some clients in California and residential clients that I do designs for. But primarily, my business, I get a lot from doing the training of technical staff because that's a big priority, and I'm gone pretty much half of the year doing that work. I'm slowly starting to build up more of the research and academic aspect, which is, of course, having to do with my studies, and I'm working with my research team to apply for some grants, and my advisor just got a grant with the Department of Energy actually to do what's called a solar desalination study, basically fresh water from seawater through solar. And yeah, but basically my business model has been a few really good contracts right now.
That's
Yeah.
great. So you do. The transactions are either a document or a training where you have to be there, or an installation. I'm just thinking of business transaction. In exchange of the money, there's either a
Right.
recommendation that's sent, I guess, with a document, or a training that requires you to travel, or an installation. Do you travel for installations?
Primarily, no. So it's exactly so it's either I'm providing a design,
Mm-hmm.
like a drawing for a system, a solar system, or I'm right on site giving a training.
Mm-hmm.
So I have installers that I work with who, are certified. It's tricky because in each state there's different regulations for who can install. So, I have in California a local, um, certified individual. So I give him the design, and then he will, do the installation. But primarily, it's remote. A lot of the work I do is analysis, research, editing.
Fantastic. That's great. So I just wanted to share, I was asking about business model because that's one of the major components that makes a business portable. It's how that money is happening and what kind of, and this is why I was using the term transaction, what transactions are happening. Those are the two questions somehow to ask ourselves to build our business model. How do I generate revenue, and how am I delivering what I'm paid for? And are those two things portable? Basically, that's the magic formula to know if your business is portable. So what I want to say about your case, just for those who are consultants, that case is a great example how you turn a consulting business that requires a lot of presence is to do what you said, get an international number, travel on certain occasions. But also if you can't travel, and it's a little bit what you also do, is by having a team of people who can be there for you. And that's what you've done, first of all, with your team, but also with the subcontractors that you have.
I think you summed it up very well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So now the next challenge. So all of you know, Met Nation, who are in consulting and wondering, usually consulting is one of the most portable business, honestly. I do believe that. But in your case, it has this physical and technical aspect where you do need to think about what makes it portable. So, but let's talk about your marketing. What I think that could be challenging in your case, because it's such a B2B, requires a lot of presence in terms of marketing, a lot of networking, a lot of one-to-one relationships. So that's where I'm questioning how you're making your marketing strategy portable, and how do you acquire new clients?
That's an excellent question. And I think one of the big things I do is every time I travel, I make it an opportunity to make new connections and to share information about the company. Mm-hmm. So, through that, for instance, I was in West Africa giving a training, and then I talk about how I do solar energy, and they are at the embassy having a new solar energy system installed. And so they say, oh, wonderful, you could do oversight, commissioning in the future, operations and maintenance. And so they asked for me to submit a proposal for that. So because of the fact that I'm far away from where my clients are, whenever I travel, I have to take full advantage of it. Last week, for instance, I was in New York, and I think I had 4 different meetings every evening. So like I was booked 4 times over. Wow. So, that's number one. Number two is I still really much working on getting a solid marketing plan in place. I just haven't really had the time to focus on it or made the time. I'm working on as an LLC, making myself eligible for certain government contracts because that's where my niche is. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of marketing, I've done some analyses with the General Services Administration. They have what's called a Small Business Administration, and they have a lot of free resources. So especially if you qualify for any of the minority statuses, the government, and you are a U.S. business, the government provides a lot of what's called set-asides for those businesses. And so that's kind of the market that I'm trying to tap into right now.
That's smart. I think having that niche that's clear and where there's an opportunity it's really smart to do it. So you've shared so many great things with us here. Is there one advice that you would really want to share for those who are in your case?
There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I probably have been on this site or sites like yours before, and especially when I started and I jumped off that cliff and moved to West Africa and got malaria, and which is your story. I spent hours on these types of websites and really tried to find that network. And I was going through a depression. And what I realized was that it was this kind of deconstruction of my identity. I grew up really, in the Northeast United States, thinking my career was the definition of who I am. And I had a complete identity shift. And so I would say that, I wrote a blog post that our mutual friend Carol put up on LinkedIn that I would recommend people go to. And it really summarizes how I feel about this. But I would really, in a nutshell, say being a tandem spouse or partner gives us an opportunity to have a new identity. And we should look at it as an opportunity rather than a punishment or some sort of condemnation. For me, it was a way to jump off the traditional career ladder and to reassemble who I am based around what I've always wanted to be. And so I came from this sort of, international relations background, which is great. But through this process, I realized that I always wanted to go into engineering and innovation. And it gave me ample time to do so. And this is currently how I have the time to be working on my doctorate.
That's amazing. And I really appreciate that you are open with us and vulnerable with us to share with us that you have been struggling. It's not, and I think when we share stories of successes, it's important to do that, to say that it wasn't always like that, to get to where you are today, you went through some struggles. And today you can share that it's a great thing to renew our identity. But it wasn't that easy for you when you started, and all of us, to accept that we do have to give up that image that we had ourselves and build a new one.
Right.
Yeah. So
and it starts with ourselves. It starts with you, not with others. And it starts with you thinking about yourself differently than how others perceive of you as just a partner or just a spouse. You need to think of yourself as being at the center of your own life.
Oh, love it. I love that. It would be so great to finish on this, but I would love to also ask you just it was one trigger that helped you get out of this depression? Because I know so many people go through it. And um, what would be the one thing to do if we're in this case?
Hmm,
It's hard.
that's a hard question.
I would been through that too. So I would not know. I'm thinking too right now. I would say in my case, you can maybe help me out. It comes from first acknowledging that it's we're not doing well. I think for me, it took a while to understand that I was struggling. And it was important to just admit that it's hard. I think just
Hmm.
starting by that was already helpful. And then think, okay, now what can I do? And that was the process that I've been through. Also, having friends around is very
Yeah.
important. And for me, making sure that we also just communicate with our partner so that they understand what we're going through without it's so easy to have resentment in this situation. It's so easy to blame the other why we're feeling so bad because you brought me to this peephole. So so I went so there are some tough countries to go to, and a lot of conversations end up
Right,
like that.
right.
So I don't know about you if this triggered some ideas for you, but for me that was what helped me go through the tough times.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely got some ideas now, but I've never been asked that before, so it took me back aback. Number one, I would say I actually had a wonderful. And now this is a resource that we have in the State Department, so it's not necessarily
Yeah.
applicable to everyone, but I think having someone to talk to that is has been through this before is essential. And I had this woman, I'll just say it, Carol Brooke Williams. She's
Yeah. Hey,
wonderful.
Carol.
Carol, she talked to me when I was in Niger. She talked to me when I was in Canada through the darkest times. And anyway, they're called a global employment advisor. And really, she was, she helped me so much to rethink about my career and myself.
So actually, that's a good point. I want to interrupt here because if you
Mhm.
don't have that help, get it. And that's really important. Actually, that's also something that I have done that I completely forgot. It's great to talk about this because it's funny how things we just keep forgetting what happened. And for me, getting help was also really instrumental. So if you don't have it naturally, you need to invest in it. And I think that's the other message I think we should share here.
Yeah, sometimes you really just need help. And I would agree, having friends outside. Okay, now, yeah, having friends outside of the bubble of your partner, which is to say, if all your friends are attached to his or her job, you're always going to look at yourself the way that they look at you, which is, the connection with their colleague. You need to find your own group of people wherever you are. And even though I no longer really look very hard for work on the local economy, I do look very hard for a network and a group of friends. For my my personal sanity, it's just essential. It's essential to connect with somebody just based on nothing to do with your professional life. Having friends, that I did that in Canada, I've done it here. And also in Canada, when I had a lot of time on my hands, I ended up getting a lot into cooking. So finding a hobby was really nice. And then sharing that food with the new friends that I made.
Those are great advice. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate this conversation. I could keep going here. So thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your story, inspiring story, and I love your spirit. So keep rocking, and I wish you lots of many successes with your company.
No, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure. And I actually want to thank Carol, who introduced us to each other. And big greetings to you, Carol, if you're listening.
Hey, Carol.
All right, Nomad Nation. So I hope this interview was inspiring for you as much as I've been enjoying doing it. And you can find all the information we mentioned in this episode in the webpage of this podcast on tandemnomads.com. So as usual, stay tuned to turn your challenges into great opportunities.